All right, so something that I like to do, or something that I try to do is, as I go through things that I go through, I want to try to share that, my thought process, what I'm learning through all of that, and like what I'm seeing from it. So this is kind of different than any other type of stuff that I do. It's like 11:30 on Saturday night, but I want to try to, like, on weekends, sometimes what I do, or during part of the weekends, what I do is I kind of reset. I'm like, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? Where am I going? How am I kind of setting up everything that I want to do, right? So what I was thinking about here tonight was, as I was going through some stuff, is like how I've changed how I view. No one likes talking about this, but like how I've changed how I view money and its role in what I do. Because like I was brought up where I grew up to not really talk about it, to not want too much of it, to not, like, basically everything that most people are told about it. That's kind of what I was brought up with, or what I thought about. And so I just wanted to talk about some changes that I've made to go along with that, because what it really comes down to is I start to understand that the money piece of it, or the money side of it, is I was making that more important than what I wanted for myself. Like the piece of paper that was the money was more important than what I wanted to get out of the life that I want to create, or the life that I want to have. And what I mean by that is, if there was something that was outside a level of money that I was willing to invest, or that I thought was too much, or that I thought was outrageous, or whatever it was, then I wouldn't do that thing. But what would happen is I would get antagonistic towards that, because I legitimately wanted to do that thing, but I've been told, like, and not necessarily by anyone's fault, that's not the point of this, but like, I just gone through enough experiences where if the money was, like, I was basically told what a lot of money was, and if it was that amount for something, then I was like, well, I don't want to do that, and I would just like get antagonistic towards that, because I really wanted to do that, but I was just like told not to make enough to be able to do that. So it's like I had these two conflicting views, or these two sides that were pulling against each other, where I wanted to do something, but I was told, like, simply because of what it costs, like, don't do that thing, and be like antagonistic towards that. And so just through some work over the past year, 2, 3 years, I've started to be able to start to change that a little bit, and it's helped a lot, or I've noticed like a lot of actual changes. So just for an example right here, I moved to a new spot here about 2 weeks ago, and the reason that, was it 2 weeks? Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago. And the reason that I did that was to be able to go to a place to do some work that I'm working on for myself. So a couple things that go into that revolve around the money piece. Number one is my rent here. I don't know if we need the whiteboard, but my rent here is 6 times what it was in the place that I was at before, for a very similar spot. And so previously there's no chance that I would have made this move, or that I would have been willing to do that, because like just the way that I computed was, if it's 6 times more, don't do it. It wasn't, if it's 6 times more, earn enough that you can pay the 6 times more to go do what you want to do. It was it's 6 times more, don't do it, cut it off, that's it, right? That's the way that I used to compute it. That's the way that I used to think. Change that I made is like, okay, it's 6 times more. Is that, like I talked about before, is the 6 times more pieces of paper? Literally understand that's what it is. It's just like, it's a piece of paper that represents a certain value, right? So if you, like, what it came down to was, is that 6 times more pieces of paper, is that worth more than the experience, or what I want to get out of what I'm doing here? And again, before I wouldn't have even considered it. Now I'm like, no, I actually want to do that thing, so let's figure out how to be able to do that, right? Because there's also, like, there's also the aspect of what is the actual problem that you have. My problem, the problem that I want to have isn't that my rent is 6 times more. That's not the problem that I want to focus on. The problem is this massive thing that I want to be able to build and create. Like, if your problem is this, like, let's say my problem equates to a money amount that's 500 times what my old rent was, this 6 times multiple on the rent, it's like this little tiny chunk, right? Whereas before that's like all I would be able to see, but now it's like this tiny chunk compared to this huge thing that I want to be able to create. So that makes that decision to do that much more easier for me. So there's that piece that's gone up, and then also the work that I'm doing costs, what's the best way to, it's gonna cost another 2 times on my rent over the course of 3 months. So like rent, that's all I'll say for right now. But so like rent went up 6 times. I'm gonna be here for 3 months. I may stay for longer. But so rent went up 6 times, and then with that rent is like that's 2 times, 2 of those, so like 2 months of that is basically what it costs for me to do the work that I'm doing while here. In addition to, like, it's separate from the business. It's stuff that I'm doing for myself that's gonna help improve the business, help improve me to be better in the business, and to be like have better decision making and know how to structure things and everything. But point being, like, again, that's another piece where I would have looked at it and been like, they're charging this much. It's too much, right? It's too much, and that it's like it's completely arbitrary based upon the experiences that I've had of what a lot is. And again, it comes back to I've been starting to be able to like open it up to more of, I don't have a, let's just call it $5,000. I don't have a $5,000 problem. I have like a $500,000 problem, a $5 million problem, like whatever that's the problem that I want to have, not the little tiny problem. And if you start to create solutions for that big problem, then the little tiny problems start to kind of solve themselves through the solutions that you come up with for the bigger problem. So what's helped the most kind of make this transition is starting to, number one, I had to understand that the perspective that I had wasn't necessarily the one that I wanted to have. Meaning that I didn't want to have this friction where there was something that I wanted to do, but there was a cost that went with it that I didn't want to spend, and it was like I was antagonistic towards actually doing the work to make what it would cost to be able to do this and to actually enjoy this. Like, to not do it antagonistically, like, well, it costs this much, don't want to do it, but I'm still going to do it, blah blah blah. It's like, no, I want to do it, and I'm going to like choose to do that and not have that antagonism there. So it's like I had to understand that I was limited in that thinking in the first place. I had to understand that there's antagonism there, and then I had to understand why it was there, and that was as a result of information or experiences that I had, right? And that's what was creating that. So that was the first piece, is understanding that was there, and it doesn't have to be there. Like nothing within your experience, nothing within your perception has to be there. You get to choose if something's there or if you want to change it, but you have to be aware that it's there first, right? So that was like the first piece, is understanding that it's actually there. Second piece was, if that's there and all these different lenses and perspectives are creating limitations on what I think I can create or like what I can think to create, then I need to start looking at, okay, if I'm now aware that these limitations have been there, what would it look like for me to take those off, and what would I actually want to do if I took those off? Not looking at what do I think I can do within this mindset that I have right now, or within this perspective that I have right now, but what would I actually want to create? Understanding that everything that I want to create is creatable. Like there's the potential for it to happen. So not putting a limit on that, and looking at what would I actually want to do without limiting it by like, that's stupid, it's too much, it's whatever. It's like, take all that away and figure out how to solve the problem to create the thing that I wanted to create, right? So that was like the second piece, and then third piece is actually taking the action to follow through on those, because it's one thing to be like, okay, I know I have these different perceptions that aren't mine and it's causing this friction, right? That's one thing. It's another thing to be like, okay, maybe I can take all this off and I can start to think in a different way. But it's completely different when you start to actually put into action those things, because it takes actual courage to do those things. Like, it's not comfortable for me to come here and to pay 6 times more for rent and then to pay more for the stuff that I'm doing. That's just like, it's not necessarily comfortable for me to do that, and it's like a different way that I've operated before, right? Because before I would have operated where I was just like, keep it safe, play it safe, stay in the spot that I was at, and not decide to do this. But in order to actually expand and show yourself that it's real, like to show yourself that there's perceptions and perspectives that you've had that don't have to be there, and that you can create more than you thought you could create. In order to show yourself that that's real, you have to actually have the courage to step into and take the action of whatever it is that would allow you to start creating that, right? So it's like those three put together, and it doesn't mean, as it relates to like the money piece, it doesn't mean that, I mean, this is just where I'm at right now. Like, it doesn't mean that I go and spend more than I have or whatever. It just means that I'm not necessarily trying to conserve at this point. I'm trying to create enough that the conserve happens, because there's so much like surplus there, right? And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like, I want that to be, like, I know that what I want to do is good, and I'm like, I couldn't do this if I wasn't going at it with what I thought was exactly the correct way to go about it in terms of the service and the help and the stuff that I'm providing people, like through the business that I have. I wouldn't be able to expand in terms of like, okay, how much do you want to create if I wasn't doing it exactly in the way that I thought was like best, right? Was ethically, more like whatever you want to say, like, I'm doing the best that I can, best that I know how, and as I learn better, I'll do better, right? So there's like, if you're actually doing the best that you can, then there's no reason not to try to create as much as you can. And I think one of the reasons that a lot of people don't try to create more is like they don't have it fully fleshed out what they're doing. They don't actually understand what they're doing. They don't actually know why they're doing what they're doing. It's like they're just there. And if you actually thought the whole thing through, and you understood what you're doing, and if what you were doing wasn't like the way that you want to do it, and you actually made the change, and you were doing exactly what you wanted to do, then you would be more willing to go out and create more of that, because like it's basically you that you're putting into that, right? And it just like, it continues to feel you as you go and as you go. Like, the more of all the stuff that I do, the better it feels, and the more of myself I feel like I am, versus like before when there's all these restrictions and kind of like conflicts. As those are allowed to kind of dissipate, it's like, I want to do more, I'm able to do more, and it feels like I'm doing more of what I'm meant to do. So, I mean, I don't know exactly where I'm going with all that, except to start to look at, not looking at what basically like you've been programmed to think you should do or you could have, or what's too much or what's too little, not being within that little fishbowl, but starting to be able to understand that the fishbowl is there, to be able to take that off, to be able to start to expand and think like, okay, what could I actually do? And then to start actually doing the physical actions that lead to that. And that's going to involve like physical work, it's going to involve physical money, it's going to involve like things that actually happen in the real world. And as you start to do that, you start to realize like how much more is possible for you to be able to create and to do.